Hello, 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 hello. We are on to day 4 of the Art Heals Bootcamp, and it's all about expressing yourself. Self-expression, express yourself. You gotta express yourself. So, welcome to day 4, and hope you have got on well with today's challenge, which was an invitation for you to express yourself, and that's very open. There's an option for you to be able to do something about how you're feeling, expressing a particular emotion, or it could have been expressing a thought, a particular value or characteristic, something about you, something you're wanting to express. So actually, self-expression is so important for human development and connection with people. So if you are showing up genuinely, if you're able to, got hiccups, hang on. If you're able to talk about what you want and communicate to people about how you're feeling, then actually that can be a really good way of improving relationships and strong relationships. However, sometimes our emotions can be so huge and so kind of complex and lots of things going on that it can be hard to find the words to express just how you're feeling. So in some ways, we've got 2 different ways of expressing yourself. Expressing yourself to get something out, to get something off your chest, that cathartic expression, which is that sense of like personal expression. And then we've got expression to communicate. So actually, very different way of working, expressing yourself to communicate something compared to expressing yourself to like making something for you. So what you might find is that actually, if you're going down the line of creating something for you rather than for somebody else, you might end up making something totally different. You might find that you are freer when you allow yourself to just create something for yourself, expressing kind of a feeling, expressing something that feels genuine, and doesn't matter what it looks like in the end. There's no wrong answer to these. There isn't going to be anyone saying, hang on a minute, that's not how you express that, because it's your expression, it's your voice, your creative voice that is doing this. So I've had quite a slow day, I'd say, today. I've been doing lots of bits and pieces, a bit of housework, a bit of admin, and other than that, like a bit gardening as well, went for a walk, and it feels like quite a slow day. So in some ways I've felt quite tired and quite quite flat a little bit. So I'm wanting to express something that kind of a feeling of being more energized. It's an expression of something that I want to feel. So that flat mood and that kind of thing of taking time to pause, and rather than rushing and just doing bits and pieces, that's kind of been where I'm at. And if I was to describe to somebody how I felt about that, then I could probably say maybe pottering was maybe the word that I'd use to describe, but it's maybe a lower energy compared to maybe a more upbeat energy when I'm like moving around doing things that I enjoy. So I've chosen to use watercolours, and while I'm talking to you, I'm just going to create something that feels in flow. So part of my feeling that haven't been productive today is because I've been doing lots and lots of bits and pieces and starting with things, and it's not really been in flow. So I've got these different fragments of shapes that can feel quite separate and feel quite clunky and awkward. And actually my intention with expressing this is to do something that then in the end feels more aligned and in flow and connected. So these sorts of images, this kind of abstract thing, I'll hold it up so you can see a bit better. This kind of abstract piece, I've got another one here that I created a few weeks ago. These kind of abstract pieces are embodied images. It might be embodying and representing something that is from within, that is maybe a feeling, a state of mind, like those emotions that don't necessarily have words, but it just holds on to that emotion and it's showing that emotion. However, you might, as part of your self-expression art activity, you might have been making something where you've drawn particular things, where you've maybe drawn something that looks like something. So I suppose what that would mean is being a diagrammatic image. So for instance, something like a smiley face would be a diagrammatic image, because it's a diagram, like a bit like a map sort of thing, or like expressing your feelings based on like a portrait, and then, oh, I'm feeling sad, I'm going to draw a sad face, and that representing it, compared to feeling sad and instead of painting with lots of energy, you might paint very slowly to express that. So we've got two different ways of approaching things. You can have things that are quite abstract and quite embodied, and that might, sometimes you might not have a plan when you're starting to draw something. Other times it might be more of a diagram of what you're wanting to illustrate, and that could be a particular situation that you're wanting to illustrate. And some of those things can be quite important when it comes to maybe communicating something to somebody else. So sometimes people go for more of a diagrammatic thing when they might imagine that they could share that with somebody else. But the meaning that you put on it and what it means to you is purely to you. So you might make something and think, oh, actually it's changed, I'm not sure about this now, we might evolve this into something else, and then the meaning might change once again. So I'm doing more of an abstracty embodied piece to capture this maybe slowness of today. Yeah, I've been doing bits and pieces. But it's felt quite slow, and it's felt quite lazy at some times. There's been times when I've not been very motivated, and that's okay. Doing things quite slowly rather than rushing around, and sometimes that can be seen as like a challenge. It's like, oh, I need to, maybe putting pressure on yourself to do things. So when it comes to creating art for expression, one of the things that can be useful to do is to recognise maybe how you are feeling while you're making it. So notice what sort of things are coming up. If there's any thoughts that come up when you're making your artwork, just notice those. You don't need to interpret them or have a big judgment. Just notice that you've got that thought. And it could be that some ideas come up about your artwork, and you could even jot some ideas down. So like I might kind of have the idea here of having collage, and it might include, like, I might even colour over that, because I might have just preferred to put my notes in a sketchbook, in a journal. But you could jot down those ideas and come back to it later, because actually you could start building up with collage if you wanted to straight away, but you might not be ready to do that, and it means that your ideas are captured. Or you might have a thought about, like just now I've got this thought of, oh, that was silly, Leslie, writing collage in the middle of your artwork. That was a silly thing to do. So that there's that judgment. However, actually, oh, you're on a live with all these people, and you're trying to explain what's going on, and maybe you don't make sense. So this is that inner critic that comes up for everybody. And like the inner critic is really strong at times, especially when you're tired, or when there's been some challenge. Maybe when you're hungry, angry. When you're hungry and tired, the inner critic comes up, like really dominantly. And if your emotions aren't feeling very regulated, then that inner critic about you, that judgment about your artwork, about what you're doing, might feel stronger. However, actually, when you notice that and say, hang on, you don't, oh, this reminds me of a dinosaur, let's make that into a dinosaur. Sort of a dinosaur. Sort of, I don't really know. It's not quite dinosaur. Let's just... I don't think it's quite dinosaur, but maybe. But I guess this is the fun of art. You could be creating something about a challenging topic and suddenly you've drawn a dinosaur. Or you could be creating something like a butterfly or something, and then suddenly it's changed into something else. So, and that's the reason why art's really good for self-expression, is that you can evolve and you can change those things that you're making as you go along, really, as you make it. And what you're expressing one day could be very different the next day. So there's a real flexibility with it, and being able to hold on to loads of different emotions at the same time can be hard, like cognitively. But if you're putting that in your artwork, then that is where the emotions are held. That's why it's maybe, you can look at a picture and it could hold on to lots of different emotions in a embodied way. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about self-expression. If there are some questions that you might want to reflect on, could include things like, how well do you express yourself? Do you find that there's certain people that you can express yourself more genuinely with, that you can be really honest with? Are there times when you feel that you can be really creative and come up with something very expressive? And are there times when it feels just that you might feel a bit stuck and maybe in that freeze zone? A question about creativity could be about, what are the sorts of things that, I'll jot these down in the group, what are the sorts of things that help you to be more creative? And what are the sorts of things that stop you from being creative, the obstacles? So I get a lot of ideas when I'm moving. So if I've gone for a walk, if I'm feeling a bit stuck and I'm not feeling very inspired, and I'm maybe feeling like, I've not got many ideas, when I go for a walk, or if I get in my car, then I'll come up with loads of ideas, and I'll be thinking, right, actually, I might look around at nature around me and then like spark something within me. So actually going for walks, spending time in nature, having music playing, for instance, that helps me to be more creative. The types of things that stop me from being creative is maybe if I'm trying to do something perfectly, if I'm putting pressure on myself to do something in a certain way, to have a plan, then actually that stops me from being creative, which is why I didn't really have a plan as to what I was going to do today, but I wanted just to express something. And actually, like sometimes you don't know what you're expressing until you finish making it, which I think is quite a cool thing, really. So I might just carry on and finish this off, and I've got some ideas about like some techniques to show you tomorrow when it comes to sort of developing things to feel really empowered by, to sort of transform images and artwork in very different ways. So hope that you found this useful, and we can I can answer any questions that you've got, or we can talk more about all of these different topics, like thinking about self-expression. And perhaps one of the things that is important is the balance between self-expression and emotional regulation. So some of the art that you make may intend to be about expressing yourself, but then in the end the purpose and the result might have been that it became more about like emotional regulation and calming your nervous system. And likewise the other way around, you might be making something that is with the intention to feel like calmer if you're feeling stressed, or to energize you if you're feeling really tired, or if you're feeling a bit rubbish, if your mood's really flat and if you're feeling quite down, you might want to make some art to boost your mood. And then when you look at it, you might think, well, actually what I'm expressing here is a particular emotion, and recognizing that is really important to kind of think, well, what's the outcome from that? And sometimes if you're feeling like a bit sad, or if you're feeling quite agitated up here, then you might not feel like making art, but sort of forcing yourself to do it, just being really disciplined to do it, can be really, really important. And that takes a lot of courage, does take a lot of discipline. But I've said this before, you don't need to wait until you're inspired to get creative. In the same way that people talk about how go to the gym and get it into a routine, and have that discipline, rather than go, even when you've got that discipline and when you've got that routine of making art every day or whatever you want to do, you don't need to wait until you're inspired to do it. It just happens. So thanks for watching, either live or on the replay, and I will see you soon. And take care. Bye bye.